Hello, everybody. Welcome to the National Cybersecurity Student Association monthly webinar series. My name is Gustavo Hinojosa, Director of the National Cybersecurity Student Association. Today's presenter is David Tobey, Director of Research and Assessments with the National CyberWatch Center. The title for today's webcast is CyberWatch Mastery Badge Program, Raising the Bar of Cybersecurity Capability Maturity. So today we're going to learn how to become one of the first to earn CyberWatch Mastery Badge Program in the Information Security Fundamentals series. This webcast will focus on the first of a series of credentials that apply to behaviorally anchored rating bar systems to accurately predict job and career readiness in the cybersecurity profession. The results will document your capabilities for current and potential employers, and you will receive detailed guidance on what capabilities you need to improve with recommendations for resources that can help you to raise your cybersecurity capability maturity. This first installment in the series of Raising the Bar formative credentialing webcast will provide you a hands-on opportunity to assess the depth of your knowledge and skills of related topics in network protocols and your capabilities to perform essential tasks for securing and protecting critical infrastructure systems. You will receive an instant overview of your results with a more detailed report emailed to you in a few weeks that will benchmark your capabilities against your student peers and experienced cybersecurity professionals. The Raise the Bar formative credentialing is brought to you by the generous support of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. This time I'm going to hand it over to David.
Thank you, Gus, and welcome everyone. I want to give you a little bit background before we release you into the assessment, but most of our time tonight will be used to give you an opportunity to assess your capabilities against a standardized assessment instrument that has been used throughout a number of different organizations, both large and small across the world. And I think you'll find that the results are quite informative and insightful. And more importantly, we have many employers who are anxious to understand your capabilities. And because this assessment is designed using scientific techniques that ensure its reliability and its accuracy, it's very important that you try to be as honest as possible in assessing your experience. It is calibrated so it can determine if people are trying to overestimating or potentially even underestimating their capabilities. So it will calibrate to your responses and will produce a profile of you that will provide you information back, but also that profile could be made available to prospective employers to contact you. So we ask that that we're going to ask you to share, be able to share this information. It will be shared anonymously, so don't worry about your personal data being shared. But if you would like your profile details to be returned back to you along with a benchmark analysis, as Gus mentioned, we will ask that you log your name and email. That information is retained separate from the responses that you're going to give to the assessment. So again, the assessment itself is anonymized, but we do have a way, if an employer were to request more information for that information to be provided back to you, and then you can contact them. But the data itself will be anonymized, so they will not know who you are unless you want them to. So let me walk you through briefly what this program is about. The CyberWatch Center has been running a series of programs over the last several years to develop a new set of curriculum for the cybersecurity profession. And this type of curriculum is called the competency-based mastery learning curriculum. The reason it's called that is it's built around all the competencies necessary to perform the varying specialty jobs in cybersecurity. So what you see in this graphic along the top there is perhaps familiar to many of you. It is the structure of the National Initiative of Cybersecurity Education, otherwise called NICE, and the corollary framework that was produced called the National Cybersecurity Workforce Framework, or NCWF. So that framework is being used by many employers. Certainly the government has adopted it broadly, but a number of organizations throughout the country have adopted it as well to manage their talent pipeline. And we, over the last several years, have mapped all of the National CyberWatch course curricula to this framework, and therefore the report, that benchmark report that you can receive if you choose to do so, will also map your capabilities against the framework. So you can have a real good picture as to the types of responsibility areas that you'll be that you've shown capability in. So the curricula obviously begins really with the foundations of cybersecurity. Those are the fundamentals of information technology that relate to the cybersecurity profession: networking, scripting, and server management. And most importantly, it relates to the transition of that IT knowledge into the security domain. And the Information Security Fundamentals course, otherwise called the NCC 210, is the one that provides that gateway, that bridge between the information technology capabilities and the specialty areas associated with cybersecurity. So we have taken this framework, and we're in the process of developing a series of assessment instruments that will allow you to, number one, identify where your strengths and weaknesses are, what areas you may need improvement in, and be given specific recommendations on the type of courseware or other resources that might be helpful to you to fill in any gaps. The first of these is the Information Security Fundamentals, since that is so critical, really at the heart of this structure. We are beginning here and are going to be having, as Gus mentioned, a series of these webcasts over the next couple months that will allow you an opportunity to participate in a set of assessments. Again, if you wish that your profile could be shared with employers, and then they could contact you for opportunities they have. But more importantly, you would get a growing profile of your capabilities to know what varying roles that you are suited for, as well as what additional education you might need in order to advance your capabilities. So what that looks like is, this is an example from an individual that took the maturity assessment last year in advance of our 3CS conference, the Community College Cyber Summit that is occurring this year at the last day of July, beginning of August, down in Shreveport, Louisiana. And as you can see, this individual showed one area that they were low in their maturity. They had several areas that they had a medium level of maturity, and then a number of areas where they were quite high. On the left-hand side, you see how those relate to the varying maturity levels. One being a beginner, that's the red line. Two, someone who's proficient, meaning knowledgeable of what to do, but perhaps not sufficiently practiced to become skilled yet in performing those responsibilities. A competent person would be someone whose responsibility areas are indicating they are above or beyond the blue line. And then finally, someone who is an expert would be touching or above the green line. So this particular individual showed that they were very strong in communicating the results of cybersecurity assessments. They were very expert at managing security operations, but where their weakness area was really in the exploiting of penetration targets. They had developed some beginning understanding, but not yet fully proficient in that area. They were proficient in identifying penetration targets and mapping attack vectors, but again, had not practiced that sufficiently to develop competence in that area. Each of these responsibility areas, there's 14 of them, they came from an international standards initiative called the National Board of Information Security Examiners. It provides very predictive, accurately predictive assessments of your capacity to perform these responsibilities, or the responsibilities that are underneath each of these 14 areas. So we also, as I mentioned, can provide that information in relation to the National Cybersecurity Workforce Framework. And that's what's down there in the pie chart on the bottom right, showing for this individual that they were a master of one of the competency areas in the NICE framework that were relevant for their job role, that they were a beginner in 3, that they showed proficiency in 27 of the competency areas, and they were an expert in 6, while showing competency in 28. So that data is then further broken down using additional assessments. Again, these assessments will occur subsequent to tonight over the course of the next several weeks. And if you choose to register, you will then be notified when these assessments are made available, and you can choose to take them at your leisure. Each of the assessments typically take between anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes, so they're not terribly long. And they're again designed to provide you, very detailed information back, but also to allow you to be assembling a profile over time of your capability. So in this particular example, we're looking at the readiness to actually sit for the information security fundamentals assessments. And so it's basically looking at the capacity of this individual in the fundamental areas, those 4 areas I mentioned earlier of networking fundamentals, Linux fundamentals, scripting fundamentals, et cetera. And so in this particular area, this individual showed that they were still a novice in the area of understanding ports and protocols. They had developed an expertise in attack types, as well as the 3 A's, as many of you know, a very critical part of the principles of cybersecurity. They had developed proficiency in a number of other areas. And so they get a profile that gives a feel for what overall should they be working on. Generally speaking, this individual was a novice, but had shown expertise in a number of areas and were beginning to develop strengths that they could begin to leverage. The point of these assessments is really to move beyond or add additional information to the results that come from certifications. So certification exams are very valuable, but they really only provide you with information about your historic capabilities. Really, where are you today based on what you've learned previously? So they're useful for identifying your awareness of your capabilities, what your aptitude might be, and certainly what you've achieved up until that point. But in order to really continually advance and improve your cybersecurity capabilities, to mature them, hence the name Cybersecurity Capability Maturity, we need to understand not only where you've been, but where you could go tomorrow. What are you ready for? And therefore, we need diagnostic assessments rather than simply descriptive assessments. Certifications tend to be very descriptive. They just give you an indication of whether you've passed a particular set of questions. Whereas the designs of these instruments are really to help diagnose where your strengths and weaknesses may lie. Therefore, we can design very specific interventions for you that give you specific recommendations as to the type of information and or practice that you might need in order to advance your capabilities. And finally, that then allows you to develop your capabilities for tomorrow. So being able to expand your capabilities rather than simply report what capabilities you've identified prior. So really the focus here is on what's called the zone of proximal development. That zone being, what have I done before that enables me to be ready for taking on new responsibilities or learning new things? And what of those new things might be perhaps too far from my current capabilities so that I would have a difficult time assimilating those new capabilities and developing those capabilities. The key is to really be in the zone, really right where my prior achievements have enabled me to now learn new things and develop new capabilities. And that's what these assessments are designed to do, really target exactly where you are today and what would be the best thing for you to do tomorrow so that you could increase your cybersecurity capability. So to do that, we can entertain a few questions if you'd like. The chat has been open. I haven't seen anyone post a question yet, but if you have any questions about just the general idea behind the program, please feel free to enter those now. I can be answering them as people are going into the assessment if you'd like as well. But what I'd like to do right now is give you an opportunity to try out one of these assessments. So the first one that we're going to make available this week, and then, like I said, we'll be following with additional assessments over the next really 8 to 12 weeks. But the first one is really designed to assess your capability maturity associated with an entry-level job as a security engineer. So the URL there is how you get access to it. Simply type in that URL into your browser, and you should gain access to the registration. You have to start out first by registering for the program. So let me stop this share and show you what this will look like if you haven't already gone there. And so what you should see when you enter into that survey or that link is you should see this instruction that the purpose of the Raise the Bar program and this particular questionnaire is to allow you to register for the program, and most important is for you to write down the ID that you receive, and that ID is going to allow you to then access the remaining surveys. So make sure you guys see one person got the URL wrong. Let me go back and show you that again. Or actually, I can put it here in the chat as well. Just one second. Hopefully that will work for everyone. It certainly just did for me. I double checked it. So please let me know. Yes, anyone can take the assessments. Hopefully that's working now. All right, when you get in there, like I said, you'll get this instruction. Very, very important for you to write down the ID that it will give you. That ID you will use not only tonight to actually take this assessment, but in the future to take additional ones if you'd like. And then it will also allow us to send you a personalized report. Again, we do keep your information separated from the assessment data, but it does allow us to connect those when we want to send you back information. So very important that you remember and store in a safe place that ID. Once you click on next, it will then take you to the first page, which is asking you if you have a respondent ID. Of course, in your cases, I'm sure the answer is no, although if you have been involved in some of our earlier programs, you might have one. If you do, then go ahead and say yes, and you can just enter it. If not, go ahead and click no. It will then ask you to, it'll give you your ID. So there's an example of a generated ID, and you would simply type in that number in the box. And at the same time, before you leave that screen, please do type that information, write down that information so that you save it in a place that you'll have access to it. Once you've typed in your ID, click next, and it will then ask you if you would like to receive a detailed analysis for your assessment scores. The detailed analysis will give you a benchmark of your scores against other students and professionals who have taken this same assessment. So you'll have an idea of both how you stand in relation to other students, but also, more importantly, how your profile is positioned in relation to professionals in the field who are in this same job. So if you would like to do that, go ahead and click yes, and then click next, and it will, of course, ask you for your name, and then it will proceed to ask you a series of questions, demographic-related questions, and then finally, you will be given the opportunity to go into the assessment itself. So with that introduction, let me leave you to enter into the assessment. If anyone has any problems or have any questions along the way, go ahead and enter them into the chat, and we'll address them as they arise. So I see we've got a couple questions. Let me go ahead and respond as well, not only by chat, but by voice. When you get to that screen that asks you for your, if you have a respondent ID, please do say no, unless you already have one from a prior program. It will then generate one for you. Secondly, there was a question about what group you should be using. It's not, terribly important, honestly, but it would be useful probably to choose the National Cybersecurity Student Association because that's the group that's obviously working on this tonight. We've had a question about the badges. So as the program develops, we will be issuing badges based on the scores that people achieve in each of the varying assessments. Those badges will be registered with varying platforms. And yes, Carissa, they will be shareable on platforms such as LinkedIn. The question regarding cybersecurity courses taken, you should include all courses that you have taken, whether that be in education or in training programs, and boot camps certainly apply. So as people are coming in, I want to talk a little bit more about the badges. So the way the badging system will work is we will be developing a set of badges that are associated with each of the areas I started the webinar with. Each of these areas shown here on the diagram. And also at a detail level beneath this. So basically each of the competency domains within each of these areas, from networking fundamentals all the way up to the security fundamentals and ethical hacking, et cetera. Each of these will have a series of badges that then can be collected together to also obtain certificates in those areas. To attain those, you will require that you achieve a mastery status or a master status in a particular domain area. And then there will also be badges associated with gaining proficiency and also demonstrating competence. And so there'll be a series of these that will be assembled over time. They're going to plan to be structured in kind of a color-coded way, all using obviously a common brand of the CyberWatch Center. And it will allow you to basically assemble a series of them with, as in your capability maturity. Again, if you arrive late, portion of the program, we are allowing everyone to just jump right in and take their first assessment. This is one of the first, really, of a series of assessments that will be released over the next 6 to 12 weeks. And we will be informing those who register of when each assessment is available. Many are very similar to this, but there also will be others that are really driving more towards the knowledge element of cybersecurity capabilities. Some might be more performance-based, and each are designed to allow you to gain an understanding of really what your current capabilities are, but more importantly, unlike certifications and other forms of assessment that many people are familiar with in school and in training programs, these are really designed to be what's called formative. Formative being they provide you with direct feedback on the strengths and weaknesses that you are exhibiting, and can provide you with a series of recommendations for how to continue to mature your cybersecurity capabilities. So hence the name Raise the Bar. BAR stands as an acronym for Behaviorally Anchored Rating. And as you'll see as you go into this assessment, it's asking you for your confidence in performing a set of tasks. And then how often you would believe these kind of tasks should be performed. It uses those two pieces of information to identify what are your current capabilities. And it's very accurate. It's been used in dozens of organizations around the world, and validated using very sophisticated psychometric techniques. If anyone wants to know more about that, I'd always be happy to share that. Again, I'm the Director of Research and Assessments for CyberWatch. Basically, the idea behind the science, though, is it's able to calibrate your answers so that if you tend to overestimate capability or underestimate capability, it will adjust for that as it analyzes your responses to your confidence in performance and the frequency at which you believe these tasks should be performed. Therefore, it's very important to be as truthful as you possibly can. It will give you the most accurate assessment when you do so. And then, of course, each of these areas will be subject to further assessments down the road to assess your knowledge of performing those tasks, as well as your skill in actually performing the task using performance-based tests. So a number of these assessments will be fielded really over the next several years, but initially we're focusing on the information security fundamentals, as I mentioned at the outset of the webcast.
So, Toby, I had a question. When folks opt in to receive a follow-up on the comparison of other students, what does that look like? Is it different categories that they get compared to, or?
Yeah, if we go back to the slide I presented earlier, it will be basically similar to this. It will also include a peer assessment along the side. So basically, what is their relative score? Same thing occurs on the maturity assessment. So basically, you get a breakdown, and then along the side, it indicates what is the relative level of performance. In fact, I can, let me pull up an example that might be helpful to everybody. Give me a second. So can you see this, Gus?
There it goes, yeah.
Okay, so this is an example of what I was talking about. So this particular area individual, this was their CCMA score. That's a normalized score, very similar to a SAT or a GRE, or in other words, a college entrance exam, or other types of standardized tests you might have taken in your history. And so it scales your answers on a 1 to 100 level. But then also then indicates based on the range and how other people have scored on that responsibility, it will assign you a CCMA level. And then further, it allows you to compare your level against peers. So this particular instance, let's take the first one, analyze security incidents. They scored a 66.7 on the scale of 1 to 100. That puts them at a level 2, which would be the level of actually, there's a legend a little bit further up right there. So level 2 would be someone who is proficient. And the color coding here also indicates alignment of this to the NIST framework, as you see down below. So this analyze security incidents relates to the abilities to perform, respond, and recover activities or responsibilities. So that person has shown a level of proficiency, and they are kind of on the average with their peers. They're in the medium level of the percentiles. In area of communicating results, they scored an 88.9, which also showed a level of proficiency, but in that area, they are quite high in relation to their peers. So these scores can differ quite a bit. Even though that looks like a very high score, that high score is something that you'd expect from people on average, communicating results being something that someone could do without actually a great deal of technical skill, more really their communication skills. And hence, you could be proficient and get a fairly high score in that area. But that individual scoring high is a little unusual for students. We see this more often with professionals, that they're scoring high in communicating results. So these comparisons are given in 3 different categories to allow you to get a feel for how that how you might be doing in relation to others.
Great. So is this like a type of report that's generated and sent to you?
Yes, it is. And it does take a few weeks to accumulate. It also will require a completion of a few other of the assessments in order to be able to produce the entire report, because the entire report includes such as the fundamentals readiness assessment that will be started to roll out over the next couple weeks to everybody. So once we have collected this data along with the data that you'll be implementing tonight, then we'll be in a position to send out to everybody their benchmark reports.
Got you. Can students use this for possible internships or jobs to show employers their skills?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's really valuable, Gus. In last year's event that we held in Portland, IBM asked to get access to the anonymized results. In fact, this was someone 16443 was one of those people. So they got basically this report, and they reviewed that individual's overall capabilities in relation to the NICE framework, as well as individually across the responsibility areas, and then the detailed breakdown in terms of what their knowledge areas were. And then based on that, they selected individuals they wanted to interview. And IBM found first of all, the data to be extraordinarily valuable. It enabled their interviews to be much more targeted and directed and helpful to the individual as well as to the company itself. And probably one of the most important, although a bit surprising to IBM results, was that it completely eliminated any bias associated with the recruitment process. They picked 4 people to interview out of the group that had submitted information prior to the conference. And there were 2 women and 2 men, exactly what you'd expect of an unbiased result. But IBM admitted it would be, unfortunately, not what they normally would get if they were using their traditional recruitment techniques. So because the assessment is highly accurate, because the data is anonymized, they're really looking at what someone's capabilities are, not what their gender is, not what their race is, not what their age is, not what their prior background in education is or the degrees are. None of that really matters. What matters is, what are your capabilities? And so IBM found that to produce interviewees that were really well aligned with their requirements, people they really wanted to hire, and it eliminated all the bias that historically has entered into that equation.
All right, so another real quick question for folks who don't know what is CyberWatch or who is CyberWatch. Can you provide a little background and how long you folks been around?
Yeah, sure. So the National CyberWatch Center is about 15 years old. It was established with a grant from the National Science Foundation, and our role really is to help identify the capabilities, as well as how to grow those capabilities of the cybersecurity workforce. So we have over 400 colleges and universities that are members of our organization. We have a number of corporate members and a growing list of government agencies that support the work that we do. We've worked both domestically and internationally. And actually, one of the programs that came out of it, of course, was the group sponsoring tonight's webinar, the National Cybersecurity Student Association. We also helped launch the National Cyber League, as well as a number of student competitions. We host and manage the Mid-Atlantic Cybersecurity Collegiate Defense Competition, otherwise known as MACCDC. The programs that we help develop that compete in that MACCDC competition over the last 3 years have all won the national competition. So we're pretty proud of them, and certainly the work that we continue to do. We help a lot of institutions, educational institutions, in developing their cybersecurity programs, determining whether they're meeting accreditation requirements to become a center of academic excellence for the National Security Agency. And as I mentioned, we do a lot of work for a number of governmental agencies, such as the National Security Agency, Department of Homeland Security, and others who are looking for ways to ensure that both the education and the workforce are meeting the needs of industry.
All right, great.
One of the questions that came up about the right-hand side of the assessment, where it's asking you for frequency, and the question was, should you be answering in terms of how often you've done it, as well as how often it should be. Hopefully those two are the same thing. If they're not, then you might want to give some thought to how often it should be accomplished, because hopefully that is what you will be doing down the road. However, again, as long as you're consistent, if you answer how often you have done it versus how often you think it should be done, it will adjust and calibrate accordingly. I see one person commented that a number of their responses have been cannot do it all or have never done. That isn't that unusual for students. And in fact, it's certainly nothing to be too concerned about. One of the points of these assessments, again, because they're not certifications or other types of what are called summative assessments that are just looking at your achievements, they're really designed to help you understand what types of things you should be focusing on going forward to really develop your expertise and your capabilities in cybersecurity. And so having not done it before, it will give you a clearer understanding of the areas in which you need to further develop. And as you submit additional assessments and we are able to assemble a profile for you, we will provide you with that benchmark report a very specific set of recommendations of courses that you should consider taking, additional training you might want to look at, additional reading materials or other things that will be helpful to you in order to give you the experiences and the capabilities that you need. And that includes one of the functions of the National CyberWatch is developing a set of performance-based assessments and performance-based training systems. So we have developed with a partner in Baltimore, Maryland called InfoSec Learning, a set of labs that allow people to accelerate their skill development, really move that knowledge that you've gained in your courses and self-study into a set of skills. And we will be continuing to develop those with something we call the National Curriculum Standards Program. We have professionals from, again, around the world, broadly representing industry, different aspects of industry and government and academia, who are regularly developing new sets of instruction and new labs that will be made available through the National CyberWatch Student Association for students and through the National CyberWatch Center for our members, as well as others. We are recording this session, and we will also be making the slides available for those who have interest in that. And of course, the assessment will be continued to be available for you, and as the others get released, we will be making those available through the website and also through our National CyberWatch Center communicator. Many of you may already subscribe to that and get updates from it. If not, just keep an eye on our website, and we'll let you know as assessments are released. Question is, can you take the assessment later? Again, you absolutely can. If you find you're not going to have enough time tonight to finish it, you can clear and exit, and it will then allow you to take that assessment again later. You actually can take it even more than once. It doesn't, sort of save, if you will, a cookie that would prohibit you from taking it again. So that's something, we do that on purpose because we want to eventually, again, to allow you to take this as you develop. So when you take another class and you want to see, hey, what difference did that class make for me in terms of raising my capability maturity, you could take the assessment again. This is actually a way a lot of our corporate members and other organizations and government agencies are really looking to use this data to help understand not only the capabilities of individuals. It can also be used to understand capabilities of teams or capabilities of an entire organization, but especially it can be used to evaluate the effectiveness of a training or education program. I can have a group take the assessment prior to that training and then have them go through the program and then take the assessment again after and see to what extent their capability maturity has been raised, and more specifically, in what areas was that course effective in raising capability. And so you could do that too in terms of, just kind of monitoring your own personal development.
So, quick question, Toby. So, if folks want, they can go to CyberWatch's page, right, and get email updates for the next set of assessments that'll be rolling out?
That's correct. That's correct. And again, just by registering for this webinar, we'll obviously have a record of your email and whatnot, and we will continue to inform you as related webcasts and related assessments are available.
I put that link in the chat box too for everyone to set up. Great. And you can share it with other folks too.
Yeah, it looks like your one set of links kind of got bundled together there.
It sure did.
I see one person pointed out providing the results of the school. That's actually another very common use of this assessment, where entire schools are having their students take assessments, again, both before and after, pre and post their courses. And it really is valuable, Lisa, for the schools to understand, how well are their students progressing in terms of capability, and having an independent, validated, and scientifically accurate assessment of that is incredibly valuable. So we have an ongoing pilot program right now for the entire information security fundamentals. I showed you an example. In fact, on the screen still is that example profile. The set of information security fundamentals assessments is being made available to schools to have all their students take them and then use the results, not only to help their students, especially to help their students, but also to help them evaluate the effectiveness of their educational programs. Ryan, I'm glad you got some great insights. It's absolutely true that these assessments are really designed to help you do exactly, help you realize exactly what you realize, that there may be a number of areas that you've really just not gotten exposed to, not had the opportunity to learn, or perhaps, were given exposure but had no time to actually fully master it because you had to move on to the next topic. One of the things that's unique about the competency-based mastery learning programs that we're developing and working with schools to implement is they ensure that you master something before you move on. There's a gentleman named Salman Khan who started an institution called the Khan Academy. You may have heard of it. It's actually the world's largest educational institution, if you consider online education being an institution. Millions of students use it every year. And in the Khan Academy, they use this mastery learning technique. And what Salman Khan talks about is that, unfortunately, in a lot of traditional education, people get what he calls Swiss cheese learning. think of a piece of Swiss cheese with all the holes in it. Well, if I take a class and I sort of miss a few concepts along the way, I'm starting to create holes in my understanding. And even if I scored well, let's say I get a B, I get an 80% in that particular class. Well, there's still 20% of things that I didn't understand fully, didn't master fully. And so I've got holes in my cheese. Well, if I continue to do that as I go on from class to class, even sometimes getting 90, 95%, maybe sometimes not doing so well and getting 77, 75, or worse, a class is graded on the curve and I really only got 40 or 50%, but they gave me the B or C or A anyway. All those missed concepts, all of that capability that I didn't get sufficient practice in and to develop skill, all of those holes in my expertise start to add up. And these assessments allow you to identify what those are, but more importantly, when they're implemented alongside the competency-based master learning curricula that we make available to schools, it allows them to close those holes, to make sure that everybody's mastering the right things, the necessary things before moving on to the next set.
So, Tobey, I had just a comment. So one of the students said a lot of their items in this assessment, they learned from CTS and out of the classroom. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, I think part of that is, to some extent, there's a misalignment in terms of the types of concepts and, focus points of varying courses and what happens in the field when you're actually doing things. Much of education has been historically focused on proficiency, meaning understanding, not as much on necessarily gaining skills in doing, and whereas the CTF programs are all about doing, but at the same time, they fall victim to not being sometimes sufficiently focused on understanding. One of the things that made the National Cyber League very unique was it really combined those two. It was really focused on trying to make sure that the courseware was directly aligned with the competition and vice versa. And there was actually a study that we did, colleagues and I did, of that early on, and showed that at first it wasn't quite so aligned. There was some mismatching going on. And consequently, it actually was having the reverse effect that they'd hoped for. They wanted to really engage people in cybersecurity with the competition. And at first, it wasn't exactly doing that. A number of people were dropping out because they didn't feel prepared. And over time, though, they've continued to adjust it and adapt it. And by closely aligning the assessment model with the competition model, the education model with the assessment and the competition model, now it's becoming much more geared to really help people advance those capabilities in lockstep. But not every school participates in NCL. Not every school is implementing yet these competency-based mastery learning programs. They're still fairly new. But as those begin to get implemented, I think you'll find that the gap starts to close between what you learned in class and what you can do in the field.
All right, we got a question. So are these assessments for industrial purpose or for self-development or even for academic environment to develop their students?
Yes, yes, and yes. They are being used quite heavily in industry today. In fact, I literally, I'm trying to remember now when it was, I guess it was last week, I did a webinar for Raytheon, who is implementing these internationally for a number of organizations. They are really valuable for industry because it helps them to understand where the state of their current workforce is. Often it's quite alarming, quite surprising, quite eye-opening, where they have gaps in their workforce capabilities. So industry's finding tremendous value in these assessments. But it also then leads to self-development, because by identifying at the detailed level that you see here, what capabilities people have, what capabilities people need to develop, we can then create very specific recommendations as to what courseware is going to be most effective for individuals. So again, both for industrial purpose and for individual self-development, being able to get a personal development plan is really, key to accelerating your capability maturity. If you just sort of leave it to accident, what experiences you have or what courses you take, or what time you emphasize in particular learning techniques, you're not likely to have a fast growth in your capability maturity. But on the other hand, if you knew exactly what to work on because it was the next best thing that was going to have the biggest impact on your capability maturity score, then you can start to accelerate that development. And so we call this the courseware that's aligned with these assessments adaptive. Adaptive is an acronym for assessment-driven accelerated performance training using individualized virtual education. So by aligning these together, we accomplish all three of the question you asked. Give industrial environments a much more effective cybersecurity team and much more effective, especially IT workforce that is not leaving the doors open every day for attackers to come in. Individuals are able to use the personal development plans to raise their capability maturity, hence raise their bar. And finally, the academic environment is given very specific guidance, as well as the tools and techniques necessary to implement a more competency-based mastery learning approach to developing their students.
So one of the students said they got a 4.0 on every test and project. It's a bit disappointing. You know, they received a lot of experience in technology and containers, servers, virtual machines, firewall, et cetera, but none of this was part of the assessment.
Yeah, and so, that's really an interesting point, Ryan. And again, remember that this assessment comes from a broad cross-section of industry participants, along with academics and representatives from government agencies, but it is job performance focused. So underlying this assessment is something called a job performance model. Most of educational assessments might have a task analysis or might have, certainly, a set of instructional material that assessment is aligned with, but it's not necessarily the case that what you read in a book is really most helpful for you when you go to perform it on the job or perform a task on the job. So these assessments are built around job performance. What's really needed in order to be effective in preventing, in responding, in defending systems from cyber incidents. And consequently, oftentimes there's a disconnect between what I've learned and what I can really do that's going to be of value to an organization. We've used these job performance models, which are at very, very fine level of detail, as you see in the assessment, to look at where varying frameworks and systems are in alignment or out of alignment. For instance, the National Security Agency and Department of Homeland Security used it to try to determine whether the Centers for Academic Excellence program was aligned with the National Cybersecurity Workforce Framework. And the answer was, well, somewhat, but also somewhat not. And consequently, even in the most excellent of educational institutions, there were knowledge units that were being implemented that weren't actually making the right difference in terms of raising the capability maturity of the areas of the NICE framework. And so having this detailed job performance model underneath it really creates insights. And I think a number of you have identified those, this evening, that it's giving you a different way of thinking about your development of cybersecurity capability and, maybe recognizing some of the disconnects you've had in terms of your educational experience and in preparing you for the workforce. I see another person asked about at the end of the assessment, should we expect an email? So let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen from here forward. After you've completed the assessment, assuming you registered and indicated you would like to receive benchmark reports and obviously therefore also participate in the subsequent assessments, we do need to triangulate, as it's called, meaning we need multiple assessments to give you the most effective response. So you will receive an email in the next, couple weeks or so, letting you know when the next assessment will be available. It will take us at least 3 before we're able to develop a benchmark report for you. And then you will get regular emails from then on out whenever we have additional ones. The more data we have, the better your profile gets. I mean, that's hopefully obvious, but if it isn't, let me just emphasize the fact that the more information we have, we can create a more accurate analytic. For those of you who are familiar with data analytics, this is something called talent analytics. And so it benefits from big data. And therefore, to make it big, we need lots of data sources. So that information will be assembled continually over time. Once we have enough to give you an initial snapshot, you'll receive an email with your results and comparisons along the lines of what I've shown here on the screen, along with some additional detail. And then you'll continue to receive updates that will allow you to participate in additional assessments. Of course, there's no requirement at any time to participate in any or all, but again, the more you do, the more value I think you'll obtain from the results, and certainly the more value that you'll be able to demonstrate to current or prospective employers. You asked, Charles, you asked a report, where will you see a report for each time the assessment is taken? You should have gotten a report at the end, hopefully everyone did, that gave you a little profile from this particular assessment. The one I'm talking about is really the benchmark report, which will take your data from this assessment along with the additional assessments you take, and then begin to assemble a profile for you. And that profile will continue to evolve and develop over time as additional assessments are taken, and then additional reports will be sent out to you. Normal, I see that you're saying if you aren't confident in your answers, is there a point in time in which we will have to prove our answers? Yeah, so we get that question a lot, not only from people who take the assessment, but also from industry and employers. First, it's important to understand that the assessment, again, because of its scientific basis, is able to calibrate to you as you're taking it, and therefore it isn't necessarily an issue that you need to prove your answers or prove the score, if you will, by taking additional assessments. On the other hand, there is additional value and additional accuracy that develops in your profile by extending that profile beyond your confidence in performance to include your knowledge of those varying things or your actual performance of that activity during an assessment. And so those will be some of the future assessments I mentioned that we'll be making available over time. So for instance, the Information Security Fundamentals Readiness Assessment that I have displaying results of here on the screen, those modules will be some of the things that we'll be releasing over the next several weeks. And those will, in a sense, allow you to sort of, quote unquote, prove.
Still there, Tobey? Well, I'd like to thank everybody for attending this monthly webcast series. We're going to be posting this webcast on YouTube. Look out for the email, and we'll also include the slides for this presentation too. So everyone have a great day.